What's up, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabril, and I'm with
Steve. Hope everyone's doing well.
And for you guys who have never seen the show before, we're just two guys that like to talk over the biggest stories in gaming. And Steve, we always like to start with the segment, What We've Been Playing. So Steve, tell me what you've been playing.
So yeah, I've just been playing two main things, really. So obviously, I'm still playing Cyberpunk, and I'll get to that in a second. But I've had it on my shelf for a little bit, and obviously I love the game. So I've been playing Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition on PlayStation 5. And let me tell you, I've praised this game enough that I absolutely love it. And they just took it to a top-notch, a higher level where, I mean, the game plays fantastic on the new generation. I'm playing on PS5, obviously. I have the native PS5 version. And the game's fantastic. It looks great. I have it. I've dabbled with the performance mode on and off if you want to switch to the quality. And I mean, when you have it on quality, it just looks even better, like so sharp. But I keep it on performance, obviously. Combo-based game. I need all my twitchy button inputs and stuff like that. Super cool. It's interesting. I obviously jumped into the Virgil storyline because I played this one before. So I know what Nero, V, and Dante's will be when I get to it. But I wanted to see what Virgil had, his combos. He plays actually really well. He actually plays a little bit better than. It's mixed. It's a mixed bag. Some of his combos are a little bit better than the other guys, and but it's a fun experience. So that's kind of just I have an hour to kill. I can get in there, just do some combos, and just trying to get my character up to par with my abilities and stuff. So before I jump into the Bloody Palace to do all those fun challenges and things like that. So fantastic game. I was able to get it at a good price. I think it was like $20 or something like that. I snagged it at. So super cool. Really excited to be in there. When anything is frustrating me, I kind of jump into that because it's no online, no weird bugs. Like the game's finished, the game's polished, it's solid. I'm not falling through the map and anything like that. So when I'm not doing that, I am playing Cyberpunk still, 2077. Mostly, it's all I've really been playing is those two games. Cyberpunk actually a little bit more. I want to say I'm about 25 hours into Cyberpunk, which I'm pretty decent chunk in there. Reminder, I am playing the Xbox One version on an Xbox Series X version on a Series X console, playing the Xbox One version because there's no native next gen, and I'm having a good time. I know I've been very weary on the game where, like, sometimes, man, when the game is just not working right, when the textures aren't there, when the pop-ins aren't there, and the characters aren't speaking, and my missions won't progress the right way, and their missions are a little boring sometimes, I'm having a terrible time. But those have become very, very few in between these really great sections where I'm actually having in a crazy amount of time. The guns, I got no problem. I got the talking gun, Skippy, which so that's doing that way. He's got that. He keeps singing that Rihanna song. That's my only issue with him. And so I've got that. I got these other weapons, and I'm doing all these other side storylines, which seem almost a little bit more interesting than the main one, because that main one you're following for a while. I forget what his name is. Takamura,
yeah.
Takamura. I don't know if it's just his voice acting or the way his lines are delivered. Those are kind of snooze fests to me. There are some exciting ones. Like every other mission he gives me that progresses like almost the main storyline is really interesting and really cool. Like there's one where you have to do this parade scene, and it's really great. And I've got no problem with that. But some of these side missions are incredible. The stuff you have to do with Rogue, her backstory with Johnny Silverhand, and things you do with Panama and the racing company. This is a lot of great stuff. So I'm having a great time. I'm sad that not everyone is able to at least experience what I'm experiencing, because I feel like I'm at bare minimum. Like this is what the game needed bare to do to run, especially with all the new hot patches and fixes and they've been doing. And I'm having a great time. I'm actually liking this game a lot more than I thought. At no point did I think I'd be 25 hours into Cyberpunk at this point, because it's just open world shooter, but it's just to another level. All the systems really work. They threw so much at me at the beginning of the game, but it all seems to work now. The hacking, I know what to do to drones. I know what to do to doors. I use some stealth until the stealth fails, and then I just start firing at all cylinders. The stuff with Johnny Silverhand, though Keanu Reeves, some of his lines aren't the best. Some of those scenes actually really hit, are really powerful, and really exciting to see and listen to and do all that stuff. So that's all I've been playing. I'm probably will be playing those two games for a while now, until at least I probably beat Cyberpunk. I don't know if I'll be jumping into a second run once I complete Cyberpunk. I may wait till it's really enhanced and really fixed up before I do another run. And Devil May Cry, obviously, I'm just playing in there, getting those trophies. So that's all I've been playing. That's all I've been really experiencing. Besides other little nonsense on my Switch, of course. But that's all I've been playing. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so I guess I could start with Xbox. I've been playing. So last week I told you I was playing Assassin's Creed, and I was probably maybe like 60% through the game, just judging by the amount of targets you have to get. Because there's, I believe, 9, and then towards the end you find out there's 10 targets that you need to take out in that game. I was about 6 in, and I forgot what happened, but I fell off like a building, and I had like literally 8 guys on me immediately because I don't know, I landed too hard or something, and the combat was terrible. And I was like, I have to come to terms with the fact that like I hate this game and I think it's awful. And so I was like, you know what, I'm pretty close to the end here. Let me just watch a YouTube video real quick. So I got the rest of the story, and I immediately jumped into 2. And I mean, God, it's like an insane jump forward. Mm-hmm. It aged so amazingly. The story is leaps and bounds better than the first one. It plays fantastically. It holds up really, really well visually. All the systems are in place, and so yeah, I'm really, really enjoying that. I don't know specifically where I am in the story right now, but I've kind of just passed the point where you move into Venice for the first time. You got the Medici cloak and stuff like that. So I've made some decent progress in the game.
Yeah, no,
and and I'm just really, really enjoying it. Ezio is such a more interesting and vibrant character, and I like that you get to see a little bit of his progression to who. And I mean, obviously you need to suspend your disbelief a little bit because he's just a guy on the street, a street boy playing around in a bench. Within a couple hours, he's like full on like assassinating people in mass. Yeah. So and the funny thing is, the only barrier to him doing that is literally kind of just learning the skills. There's no real like mental ramifications of him taking many, many lives. But once you suspend your disbelief, I mean, that's kind of the nature of video games in many ways. It's fantastic, and I'm really, really enjoying it. And I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to go from here. I do have all the games up until 4. So if I want to, I can go into Brotherhood, and then I believe Revelations is after that. And I have all that. Because I think Revelations is the Altair Ezio crossover game. I believe. Something like that. And
there's some tie-ins.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how that works, but I do have all these games, and so if I finish 2 and I really want to continue, I'm probably going to just continue on these lines. None of these games are super long, and they're really good palate cleansers for me, where I don't play in massive chunks, but an hour or 2 here and there, once I'm like not in the mood to play the main game I'm playing, it keeps the progress in that going fast enough that I'm getting through the games relatively good, so enjoying that quite a bit. And then also I am playing Cyberpunk as well. I really, really like it. I love it, to be honest. There's a lot of issues, obviously, that I have with it. I'm experiencing pretty much all the same issues everybody else is. I bumped into a new one yesterday where I got locked in my settings menu, so that was new. And I mean, at that point, like, it auto-saves enough that I kind of just left, and I was like, what the hell? And then I really quick, whenever I bump into a bug that I've never seen before, I just go online really quick just to see if anybody else has experienced it. And I was able to find somebody, at least with a video on YouTube, who this same thing happened to him. We go to change our settings, and it locks you in there. You can't, like, press start and get out. So you have to restart the game, and when you're at the main screen, they're like, your saved settings for your settings have been corrupted. So you need to, and I got nervous for a second, but then I was like, oh no, only for my settings did it get corrupted. So I went in there and I replayed around with everything, my graphical settings and stuff like that, and how my controls are. So I was fine to go back in. And other than that, my bug experience has kind of lessened as I've gone along. The early part of the game was like really, really buggy for me. Now I do encounter like weird small things, weird wonky AI and stuff like that, but for the most part, nothing game breaking or anything like that. And it's one of those situations where I almost have to fight against playing the game and being like, is it really that bad? Because I understand we're about to go into a whole bunch of stories about what's gone on with this game, but then I have to remember and check ourselves that like we have an extremely privileged position playing this game right now. We are we're almost like best case scenario. And so it might seem like, oh, I mean, yeah, it's buggy, but is it really that bad? Is it really that much worse than like a Fallout game? But it's like, no, you have to keep in mind, and I'm telling myself this, that like 80% of people who are playing this game are not having this experience. And so that's the kind of tricky thing where it's like, as buggy as we have it good. And not the best because, there's people with higher end graphics cards out there. But, I mean, we're getting to play a relatively consistent experience where the last gen people, I mean, forget about it. And it almost makes me wonder, like, if they never did the last gen version, they just took the L of the PR of just like, sorry, we can only launch it on next gen right now, and maybe took time and delayed that one, maybe things would look different for them. I'm not sure. I just wonder what that reality looks like. Obviously, the player pool would be substantially smaller because so few people are able to even get their hands on this hardware. If you want a PC to run this, getting those graphics cards, from what I understand, are really, really difficult to get. And same thing with the PlayStation 5 and Series X. So it seems like they were kind of forced to do that, not only because they promised to have the last gen version, but if they skip just the next gen, the player pool is going to be substantially smaller, and you're going to make a fraction of the money. But I'm not going to get deeper into the money because we obviously see that there's quite a bit of fallout from this game. But I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the side quests. I like the characters. I've been trying to like get some romances going with people, and I only am able to get some rhythm with the guys, and that's really disconcerting. But that's all right. I'm going to keep it working.
Yeah, are you playing female character? Female V? Are you a female V, I mean?
Well, that's the funny thing about Cyberpunk, isn't it? It depends what your metric is.
All right,
I won't get you graphic, but there's parts of her that are male.
Did you do the masculine choice or the feminine choice?
I did the feminine choice, and she is presenting as a female. But there are aspects of her that move her in a different direction, if you understand.
Because from my understanding, it's not as open. So there's two. If you choose, there's two specific people you can do that are masculine. If you chose masculine, there's two people you can specifically get, and there's two specific ones you can get if you're female. There's a lot, even though it seems like you can do a lot of crossover, there's not, which is kind of disappointing because I put a lot of work in specifically for one relationship just to find out that I was the wrong choice for that person.
Got you. And again, this is not a spoiler. These are well-known characters are in all the trailers. I tried to get. I'm still working on the Judy thing.
Okay.
Because she's cool. And then I tried to get it going with what's Panam. I think it's her, the desert girl.
Yeah.
The nomad. And nah, she's not with the female characters thing, so that hurt my feelings. But that's all right.
Yeah, you have to be the masculine. V. I guess. I don't even know what to say.
I took my butt all the way out here to the desert for you to reject me. How dare you?
Yeah, I've been doing all this stuff for you and Soul and to pay off with nothing.
Yeah, I was sad, but I was like, you know what, that's fine. There's other choices for me. And there's obviously kind of like, I don't know what you'd call them. I mean, prostitute is a rough name, but they're essentially there. And
people standing outside the clubs, yeah.
Yeah, they just yell at you as you go by. So that is an option for you too. So I'm having a lot of fun just playing around with the different relationships that are available in the game, and I'm playing a lot of the side quests, so it makes it by the time that I go to my main quest, I have good weaponry, high amounts of ammo, and I'm highly leveled, so it's not really posing any problems to me, because that's my main thing. And I don't know how the story progresses, but I would have wondered that they're going to put me in precarious situations, and some of those earlier missions were a little feisty. So I was like, no, let me do as much side quest stuff as I can right now. And between every story mission, I try to do at least 3 or 4 side quest missions. So it keeps me leveling, keeps me stronger, helps my conversational exchanges go a little bit smoother. And so I'm just having a lot of fun with it, and I'm hoping nothing else breaks it. And I just hope more people can actually experience this. Because again, it's one of those things where, as broken as this game is in many ways, there is a really, really solid game underneath it all. And so the sooner CD Projekt Red can get to people getting this in their hands and actually playing the game front to back without any major issues, the better it's going to be for a lot of the ratings and stuff for this game, because it's one of those tricky situations where people had advanced copies, they reviewed it, they liked it, and then the player base gets it, and a lot of them don't even have the tech to be able to run this. And so it's tricky. They're not seeing what a lot of people are seeing. It's kind of a weird disconnect where the people who are able to get through it say, oh, this is a great experience. And then the other half literally can't even get it running, let alone comment on the stories. So I'm hoping for their sake they're able to get things going. And I at one point I was like, you know what, this is going to be rough for them. But somehow within the past 2 weeks, this turned into No Man's Sky. And I never in a million years would have thought that Cyberpunk would have ended up in this position. As someone who paid close attention to all the PR and stuff like that, I never would have thought they would have been the next Hello Games. But I mean, the fallout from this is insane. So I won't keep you from the story anymore. But holy crap!
Yeah, we'll get into the story and then we can expand on it because it is unfortunate that people just are literally unable to experience the game because like we've said, I'm just under 30 hours, and I don't think I've had a game-breaking bug. I've had to reload a checkpoint once or twice. My characters got stuck crouching for a while for some reason. The funniest one, and I tried to capture it because I thought it'd be hilarious, and I couldn't capture it. I came out what's the nightclub? Afterlife?
Yeah.
And I came out and I went to the street. I called my car, and it just started raining vehicles. Like, I want to say it was like 10 and 15
Really?
vehicles came out of the sky. And I could not stop laughing because it was just, like, it looked so fake. But I'm like, did I really just witness that? And it was hilarious. And I, for some reason, wasn't able to capture it. The Xbox capture button didn't work, or the game refused to capture it. I'm not really sure what it was. But let's get to the story. And then we can expand more on everything that is Cyberpunk. It's going to be a big Cyberpunk episode because this is obviously taking the gaming industry pretty much by storm just because no one saw this coming.
Yeah, they're dominating the news cycle.
Yeah. So Cyberpunk has been delisted after having a terrible launch. So Cyberpunk has had quite a rough launch, and that might be an understatement. It seems like PlayStation has taken decisive action by delisting the game from its digital store. It also promised to issue refunds. As of right now, it is still being sold on Xbox. I did see last night that there is a warning on the Xbox Marketplace when you go to play it, saying that I forgot what the exact words is, but there is a warning that the game may not be able to run properly on all consoles on the Marketplace. They're treating it
like cigarettes. That's crazy.
Yeah, there's one right there above. I think it's right before the purchase button. There's an asterisk there. So they're saying, should a retailer not offer a refund, CD Projekt Red said it will pay out of its own pocket to refund those who want it. However, the drama doesn't stop there. Staff at CD Projekt Red are asking their upper management and publisher, CD Projekt SA, tough questions about why Cyberpunk 2077 released in such a poor state. They rightfully asked why the marketing said the game was complete and playable early this year when that evidently wasn't true. And they also pointed out the apparent hypocrisy. So releasing an anti-corporate exploitation game like Cyberpunk while imposing crunch. Lastly, it's been reported Cyberpunk 2077 launch issues reportedly cost founders $1 billion in wealth. This is from the rapidly plunging value of CD Projekt Red stock. So, this is on a 12-month sales drop from 30 million copies before the re-release to 25.6 million copies now. And this article's everywhere. Mainly GameSpot has a really good breakdown where we're pulling most of our information from. It is an understatement saying that this release was flawed. And it's really, I've had this weird obsession with the word botched, but it was really botched in a sense because you have to remember this game was supposed to release in April. I want to say that was the
original
intended.
Was April, yeah.
They had a delay, and then I want to say before the other delay, whatever it was, September, they said, they were surprised on. So this is weird. They were saying they were surprised on how well the game was running on old generation. That's obviously seems to be that was straight false because if this is what it runs now, I can only imagine what this game was running in April on Xbox, on base Xbox One and base PS4, those are the systems mostly in the wild, and those are the systems obviously suffering the most. So it's crazy. It's I don't think I've ever seen Sony pull a game from their digital storefront. Obviously, this is still available if you go to your GameStops and brick and mortar stores. But for Sony to pull the game off the server, and this obviously has some fault to do with CD Projekt Red. Sony has a very strict refund policy on their digital store. Pretty much if you download it and I think even open it once, that's it. It's your game. There's nothing they can do. Oh. Because there's games on there, No Man's Sky was never refunded for people who bought it digital. There's that Tiger game. That's really
Legend of Black Tiger or something.
Yeah, it's an absolutely garbage game, and was never pulled. But I don't think any of those, their companies never went out publicly and offered refunds the way CD Projekt Red did. So yeah. Sony pretty much did. You want us to refund this game? Fine, we're taking it off the market until you fix it. And I think though people are trying to give Sony some backlash, I think that's the proper way to do it. It isn't Sony's fault that the game runs this way. This isn't their first party studio, and that's why I'm glad at least I think they should at least maybe I think the warning on Xbox needs to be a little bit more brighter. Like, I've seen some photos online that in like some Walmarts and some like Best Buys and stuff, there's a pamphlet or like a printed sheet on top of the Cyberpunk saying to ask a worker, someone who's working there about Cyberpunk 2077 to, I guess, stop the purchase. So it's like, are you playing on an Xbox One X or Series? And if it's no, then they give you a warning, I guess, to protect themselves, because CD Projekt Red went out, said we're going to refund the game without, I guess, having a plan. If in a different world where this game was really busted, I purchased it through Amazon. I don't know what Amazon's doing. People who purchased it at Best Buy and all that stuff, I don't understand. Everyone has different refund policies. So when a company comes out publicly and says we're going to refund the game, and they didn't discuss it with their retailers, it's really confusing. So it's been just such a terrible, terrible time for them. I can only imagine what it is to be at CD Projekt Red right now. It must be just... I mean, if 2020 wasn't bad enough, you have this game that people have been looking forward to so much to be completely botched, and now you're looking at refunds and stuff like that. It's just what a terrible time it must be for them.
Yeah, I saw some people kind of misinterpreting the kind of PlayStation move as like, oh wow, I mean, all these crappy games have been on the Sony eStore and they didn't take those down, but they took down Cyberpunk. They must really hate it. And it's like, I think that's a fundamental like misinterpretation of what's happening. It seems like, if anything, PlayStation has a very fixed what they see for a refund policy, and this is just a volume issue. Just the volume of refund requests they're going to get related to Cyberpunk is going to far exceed pretty much anything they've ever seen with any other games. So to keep instead of fundamentally changing their policy, what they'll do is they'll just pull it off until they're able to re-release this game in a state where not as many people will be requesting refunds and be clogging up their whole whatever report mechanism that they have on the background. So whatever you got to say about PlayStation's restrictive refund policy, this is more of just how to temper the whole volume of refund situation. Again, this is kind of like a three-part discussion, because there's the whole refund aspect of it. There is the upper management problem with the developers, and then there is the sales analysis. And so there's, I mean, and no wonder that this whole story has kind of dominated the news cycle, because there's just so many different working parts to it. And again, I'm very, very sympathetic to the developers of this game, because again, if you look there, if you pay attention to the game, content-wise, it's complete. Everything's there. It's it's a stability issue. This game is unstable, and instability doesn't, to me, scream bad development. This is a time thing. The timeline was all wrong. This needed months more in QA and finding and isolating these bugs and fixing these bugs. So this is a rush thing. This is not the developers didn't know what they were doing thing. And that's what differentiates a Cyberpunk from maybe like an Andromeda, for example, that was like fundamentally almost on all fronts just bonked, where this game is not. It's just, you could tell that it just was not ready to go out. And your timeline is very interesting, because again, it went from April to September to November, a week after the next gen launch, and then it was again to December. So it makes me wonder, like, at what point did they know this was an issue, and whoever is in charge of the launch said go with it anyways? It makes me wonder, if this came out in April, like, it's kind of weird, because it was supposed to come out in April. COVID stuff didn't really kick in until March-ish. So a good chunk of the development up until that point was kind of uninhibited by what was going on with COVID. And so what did they see in April that spooked them to the point to push it off that many months? Because if it's in this state now, I could only imagine what they saw then. And it's an unfortunate thing. I hope everybody who wasn't able to run it gets their money back. But the big question for me is, what the developers are kind of asking, which is, why were they lying about this game for so long? And obviously, it's a partly a keeping people who are interested in the game interested and not turning them off to the game, and the other half is probably appeasing shareholders and not spooking them. Because look what happened. The moment the launch happened, I mean, that thing plunged and they took flight, because they know that stock holders are very fickle and they're very
Yep.
volatile and agitated very quickly. That we know that about the stock market. That the smallest thing happens, oh, they get spooked. So if you're talking about the number one game in the industry right now being like crapped upon, yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that their stock would take a plunge so much that it would, cost them $1 billion in wealth. So that doesn't surprise me. But reading this story, what's kind of your take about it? Some of these discussions, specifically the more interesting thing about the fact that Cyberpunk is marketed at this like anti-corporation thing, but then at the same time to make this game come out, they exploited the workers through crunch and stuff like that. What do you think about that point?
Yeah, it takes us back to when this, especially the crunch story, when it first started, we were very mixed on like, well, look at the bonus they're gonna get and stuff like that, and the passion that's behind it. Now we understand there's way more problems. Now, especially now we have this, we have the CD Projekt Red development team talking to the higher ups and talking to the marketing and PR and being like, what? And I'm assuming the conversation is like, yo, we told you guys the game wasn't ready. Why'd you guys still make us launch it? We told you guys to hold it on shelves or whatever, because the game's been out in the wild for a while. But to hold it, they probably were asking for another delay, especially with the way they have their game plan, where it's like January was going to be a pretty big patch, and February is going to be the second pretty big patch. It looks like that March 2021, where everyone was kind of estimating the game should be released, is looking like is what it should have been. So it's almost not even ironic, but that the game about taking this giant corporation down, is suffering from some of its own stuff, where it's the big corporation part of CD Projekt Red that needs to do some answering now, which needs to do some damage control, and they're trying. They're doing we're changing our bonus policy because the policy was dependent on like reviews and sales at the beginning, and now they're like, no, we're gonna give everyone a bonus on, and they're doing all these last second big corporation fixing things, and it's not gonna be the best. Unfortunately the stories are out there, the game is out there, we know what it is. It's very interesting to see these two it is all one company, but see CD Projekt Red kind of split, like, hey, we made the game and the game is finished content wise. And that's something they've said for a while. We're like, yeah, the game's playable from beginning to end is usually the phrase companies like to use. They're like, it's playable from beginning to end. That doesn't mean it's not buggy, doesn't mean there's not fixes to be done. So it's insulting that the higher ups were really pushing this, and it's such a confusing thing because it's like, oh, it's to please the stocks and to please the investors, and this affects it just as much as that. I think they should have done one massive delay instead of doing these constant delays, because that's what people started thinking is something wrong with the game, because you delayed it. I think wasn't it like a week before launch, 2 weeks before launch? 'Cause it was supposed to launch close to
be a week. Yeah, it was a week after next gen launch, one of the consoles, and yeah, they pushed it less than a month, maybe like 3 weeks later into December.
Yeah, see, and that shows that there's an issue, because at that point, people had like these games were in warehouses. It wasn't like so that's the issue. And so the thing is, you're starting to see the real evil corporation side of the stuff. And some YouTubers are getting some backlash over this, because of course they were sponsored with that big nice yellow chair that you see all these YouTubers with that say Cyberpunk 27. Those people who got those chairs also, some of them coincidentally got 3080s and stuff like that, and souped up systems, souped up PCs to play the game prior to launch and to show off the game. And that's all mismarketing, because the average person, 3080s aren't that easy to get to, and those only also just launched. They're not, it's not like you just walk into any store and get them, just like the new systems. So it's such a bad showing, and it shows that evil corporation side of, we'll try to make it look so good at the upfront, they'll buy the game and then they're stuck with the game. And obviously in a world where in 2020, this is not gonna fly. Like, a game, once the game's released, it's not that easy. It's like, well, you guys bought it, it's too bad. Especially that this is a company that's progressing. They obviously want to make more games, and now their next game is gonna be under such scrutiny, and there's so much that was still promised for Cyberpunk that's missing, Early stuff that was removed, like the wall running and stuff like that. But that dynamic cop relationship is not there. The cops literally spawn out of nowhere.
Yeah.
They used to talk about how you were able to pay off cops. I don't think I've ever had a choice to pay off a cop. The cop just comes up and just starts blasting.
They just start busting at me.
So and I'll usually run them over with a car.
Yeah.
And again, I've learned that of the game where it's like, well, I just have to really drive 2 blocks and the stars go away. Unlike GTA 5, where those, if you're not hiding in a dumpster, those cops are gonna get you. You get the helicopters, you get all this kind of crazy stuff. So it's just such a domino effect, and it's really that now it's time for the higher ups of CD Projekt Red, those people who were forced to, the people who forced this game to be released. Now it's time for them to answer, and they've been kind of quiet. They've been really relying on getting these hot patches and all these things and rearranging to make it look like they're still a good corporation, like I was mentioning the bonuses and stuff. But the fact is, you've burnt your bridge, and you've burnt it in a matter of weeks. You had such high regards, and you guys had a lot of goodwill from The Witcher, even though The Witcher did not launch in the great state either. It did not launch in this bad of a state.
No. But it had its issues.
But it did have its issues. At the same time, that released to 2 consoles and a PC, where now you're looking at like 4 consoles on PlayStation, 3 consoles on Xbox, or 4 consoles on Xbox plus PC and all the specs. So there's a lot of problems there, and I think that's what needs to be addressed. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some restructuring of higher ups.
Exactly, I was going to mention that, yeah.
Because obviously there's these higher ups. It's going to be coming out of their pockets, hopefully. Not the people down on the ground working their hardest, working probably through holidays and stuff like that. Now it's going to be the higher ups who've been sipping back, drinking mimosas and stuff, thinking they're going to just rack in Witcher money.
Yeah, and it's one of those tricky things. And the more interesting conversation that I've kind of bumped into that I haven't seen a ton of people talk about is the very active and deliberate misinformation campaign that was going on before launch. They were literally, it was information suppression going on before that point, where they actively made it so that information regarding the last gen, I guess technically, version of the game couldn't get out to consumers. So it's one thing to release a game in not a great state, but the fact that they actively took moves to ensure that those last gen players did not know how their game would actually run on the hardware they have access to has to have ramifications, and that's crazy. And to this degree, I'm by no means one of those people who support the hate hordes and canceling and all that, but I think there is to some degree some accountability that have to go to some of these media influencers who were complicit in this, who were aware of the issues and because of trying to retain a relationship through embargo, didn't release the information and thus burned some of their own fan base. And I'm not saying that they need to take a financial hit or become canceled or whatever, but that I think that dialogue needs to happen, because some of these influencers were well aware of how this game was running, and the fact that in many ways their reviews didn't include this information or just maybe downright lied, just like CD Projekt Red did. You were deceiving your fan base just like CD Projekt Red was, and there has to be some degree of accountability for that as well. And again, this is not everybody, but there are some videos that I bumped into that I've revisited that are making kind of grandiose claims about the way this game runs. And it's like, we're not able to drop footage about the last gen version. I have been playing it, and then they go right back to the next gen. It's like, so you were aware. Anybody who's ever touched this on a last gen console, from what I understand, is blatantly obvious the issues with this game. So they were well aware of the issues, but they rather not, piss off the corporate or overlords. So it's funny how this, as the story evolves, CD Projekt Red becomes more and more like Arasaka, which is hilarious. Yeah. But it's crazy, and you make a great point with the restructuring thing. Again, anytime you see situations like this, heads will roll. Execs are definitely going to be resigning from their posts and stuff like that. Developers, there's a high overturn in the game industry anyways, so a lot of developers kind of go in and out of studios all the time anyways, so I'm sure some developers are going to leave, some team heads are going to leave, definitely execs are going to have to step down, and so I'm curious to see. I don't think CD Projekt Red is any existential threat right now in terms of it not existing, but I think it's going to look much, much different going forward. And it makes me wonder what the redemption arc for this game is, what the redemption arc for CD Projekt Red is, and ultimately when all dust settles, will they need a bailout is the big question. To survive, we have seen bigger entities have to step in and bail them out for whatever reason. So I wonder, does CD Projekt Red remain a individual company completely independent of major third-party investment, or are they going to have to take a little bit of that Tencent money? Maybe we see them pump a lot of money into it, or will they need like a Microsoft bailout? They already have that marketing campaign, so it makes me wonder what the future holds for them. Will they be able to remain an independent body taking this amount of loss? Is unclear, but those are the kind of major things I'm kind of focusing on. Those are the more interesting things, and again, obviously I want it to be patched and stuff like that, but I feel like there's a long tail to this story that is going to be very interesting to watch, and I hope everybody lands on their feet, and hopefully this doesn't become a stain on anybody's resume, because that's the last thing you want as a game developer. It's hard enough to find work, so hopefully they're able to bounce back, fix this. I would love a No Man's Sky type redemption for this game where they just stick by it, they fix it, and the people who like the game, and the PR kind of subsides, and the industry can kind of move past it. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's the same. I want nothing but this game to get better, and it already has. But it's interesting you talking about maybe having further issues, because I know WB is big with CD Projekt Red. I don't know what their exact role is. I was trying to look it up right now. They were the same for The Witcher, and maybe next time they don't want to put the funding. That obviously they put some sort of money into this.
For sure. They've received a lot of money from a lot of different places.
It's one of the splash screens when you get it is WB. It's on the case, and that's all that stuff. And again, they worked. So I don't know if they worked with their other older Witcher games. I know Witcher 3 has the same thing. So it makes me wonder. Maybe they pull out. Maybe they're like, listen, your next game, we're not putting this much amount in. And that makes me wonder, who has to step in to do this? Because they are still a relatively small team. I know they're pretty big, and I know they're huge, where they're at. But this is going to be something that people are going to leave the team over this. There's going to be people who probably already left the team and can't say over this, with non-disclosure agreements and stuff like that. So it's going to be, isn't there like a planned multiplayer coming to this? Wasn't that a thing?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there's going to be some multiplayer mode. It was unclear what that's going to look like. We'll see when that timeline happens.
Yeah, because they said they were going to focus on the single player because of that. And so it's interesting to be like, well, this could, and No Man's Sky is like a hit and miss, because No Man's Sky worked at launch. It just didn't have any content in it that they promised. Where this has all the content, the game's literally broken. The game is literally broken on past gen. Like, I've told 3-4 people who have base PS4s, I'm like, don't play this.
Don't even try.
They're like, oh, but is it really that bad? I'm like, listen, it's pretty bad. Yeah. And they're confused because it's like, well, I've played Death Stranding on my base PS4. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. And I think you played Death Stranding on a base PS4. I don't remember you ever telling me you had any.
No, it ran fantastically. I used the base PS4 pretty much until the very end. So I played Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us, Doom Eternal. Exactly. I played all of these on base consoles.
Exactly. So again, that's what just shows that there's some stuff that needs to be done at CD Projekt. Because remember, this game was announced in 2012, before Witcher 3 released. This game was announced. So obviously once they finished Witcher is when everybody moved over to this game, but. Death Stranding, I know it's a different kind of game, obviously a whole lot less, NPCs and characters to do it, but that game was rushed out in 3 years.
Well, the studio existed for 4 or 5, but it was only in active development, I think, for closer to 2.5, so that was a very quick turnaround for Death Stranding.
Exactly, and I know they had a lot of help, obviously, with the Decima engine. They had a lot of, help from the whole Sony family, don't get me wrong, but, there's other companies who produce these games way faster and in a more fixed state. So it's just, I don't know. There's just so much unknown. And there's going to be a story, obviously. Whatever you think of Jason Schreier out there, but he's going to get a pretty juicy story.
We just wait on his.
Just because, he's been on top of this. Who knows when someone's able to speak, it'd be like, what happened? Did they just get caught in the mix of this nonsense? between
corporate nonsense,
corporate.
crunch. Oh, he's ready for that. This is a perfect story for him.
Exactly, and so I mean, I'm really interested because again, despite what some people think about him, he does sometimes get these really, really good stories. And
oh yeah, for sure.
He's so confidential and stuff like this. So I need to hear, and I want to hear what happened. What is it that caused this to be like this? Because this isn't, the Cyberpunk isn't a bigger launch really than Witcher. I know they have more fans just for their name now because of The Witcher, but The Witcher sold pretty well at the beginning and it had a big fan base as well. So it's like, what is it that is causing this? There's something there. There's got to be, it's probably multiple factors, but something just caused this to really fall apart.
Yeah, it is very interesting, though, despite all this crazy fallout, that the analyst forecast for a year, so yeah, it dropped by almost 5 million units, 4 millions total projection for what they're going to sell. But keep in mind that 25.6 million is still like insane sales, so it's still moving copies. I don't know how many next gen consoles are out there and how many people are going to play on PC and stuff like that, so I don't know even how big their player base is. But yeah, moving 25.6 is pretty insane. And another thing, I've seen some people talking about, just in the comment sections, being like, oh man, CD Projekt Red's they ain't gonna survive this, no team, but I think it's important also to note that I did some quick lookup of this. Yeah, CD Projekt Red, I forgot what country they're from, but I looked it up. I think they're from Poland. They're out of Poland right now, and from what I understand, they receive some degree of some kind of like government stipend or something like that, because they bring a lot of like work and money into the Polish government. So they're by no means government funded, but they are government supported. So they're getting a little bit of more capital infusion than your average indie team just kind of working out of Seattle or something like that. So I would imagine they have some cushion to play around with in terms of capital expenditure, where they can maybe operate a little bit on a loss at a higher amount than your average team could. I think that's also worth noticing, that CD Projekt Red, though independent, they're not necessarily dealing with independent budgets, because again, independent is a very scalable term. It can be anything from Devolver Digital games to games that literally are made like by Innersloth, 3 people doing Among Us, to bigger teams like CD Projekt Red. Because again, the nature of what independent means, there's these kind of entities that we have, the EAs, the Activisions, Sony, Nintendo, Xbox, whatever, and if you don't fall under them and you're not getting money directly from them, then you're kind of independent of that main kind of mainstream industry, and so they exist outside of that industry for the most part, but they're still getting tons of money on the back end. So this team is a little bit different. So I think they could survive it. It's just the nature of how they look and the way their timelines play out. Like, I think a lot of content's going to get cut from this, so the long, probably season pass tail, DLC tail that they had for this one is probably going to either get shifted or canceled outright until they're able to completely fix the game. So things are going to change with this game. The forecast for this game is going to fundamentally change, but I don't think we're in a position, at least right now, where CD Projekt Red is going to telltale itself and just completely cease existence. I doubt that's going to happen right now. That obviously puts a lot of weight on whatever they work on next, making sure that it has the returns. That might downscale what they are so they can get a little bit of money on the back end. They might need... I honestly think the multiplayer thing is not a bad idea once they get this going, because persistent online are a great cash generator. So they could probably operate with the multiplayer mode, get those microtransactions in there, allow people to... And not microtransaction, I know that's like a trigger word to some people like EA.
Oh, yeah, but
just cosmetic items that if you would like to buy them, you can. That can generate a lot of Fortnite-like money long term that can maybe make up for the loss. So once they're operating in the black again and they're not taking a loss on Cyberpunk anymore, and they've at least got the money that they invested into it back and paid off all their shareholders and then the dividends and everything like that, then from that point they can move on to the next project. So I don't think it's necessarily over for this, and there's a lot more smarter business people working on these teams, way more smarter than me, that can have a path out. But again, I don't think all hope is lost, because I've seen crazier stuff out of the game industry. You and I have paid attention to this industry for a bit now. We've seen crazy stuff. A lot of crazy reverses. I would have put money down that Hello Games does not exist by this point. And look at that. They're not only existing, they're doing well. And they're a much smaller team, and it's hard to quantify which Fallout was worse, but they were comparable. Sony had a full marketing budget behind No Man's Sky, and things completely fell apart for them, and Sony took off, and Hello Games were on their own, and there was a face to it. Sean Murray was the guy getting the heat for this. So, I mean, they were going through it, and they ended up just staying persistent, allowing the hate train to die down, because naturally it's a hype thing. It's a time thing that everybody's going to pile on for a couple months, and then things are going to subside. And as long as you stick by it, you're just growing good favor with those who stuck by you. And that is good cultural currency to have in the game industry. So I am optimistic for Cyberpunk, and I'm more sympathetic, but I am kind of like where the devs are, which is screw the higher ups because they screwed you guys.
Yeah, we wish the best to everyone over there, and we just I really do like this game. I do love the game, actually. I'll change it. I do love this game a lot. Like, I want to continually keep playing it, so I just want people to enjoy it. And I think the same thing that multiplayer could come in handy to, depending what they actually do with it. If you think another character creator that you're not just playing as an edited V, and who knows what that world is with all these other storylines, could help them out. And would obviously let me tell you, they have to release this multiplayer thing for free. I don't think they'd get away with charging for it, but
yeah, it's got to be like GTA Online, if anything.
It has to be. Yeah, it has to be. So hopefully they and I'm pretty confident that they will fix this. It's going to delay their other project, the rumored other Witcher game they're working on.
Witcher 4.
Witcher 4, I don't even know what it is. Depending what ending you get in Witcher 3, it's a whole mess. But that's obviously gonna be a wrench, but it's better you do it now. And I'm excited because I invested early. I have my copy now, and it's only gonna get better. I haven't had any of these hot fixes, hot patches make my game worse. I've had it from small things, from just kind of looking better to some of the facial animations looking better. So they know what they need to do to fix it.
Yeah, I know one person who that patch seemed to have broken their game, but for me it worked fine.
Yeah, and I think there's apparently the one yesterday do something weird to your save, but also there's just the game's I constantly save. On top of that, the game's auto saving every other second. It looks like when I go to my load. If I have to go load
after
a new
missions, when you fast travel, it does it quite often. It's not a freaking Watch Dogs Legion.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye out for CD Projekt. We're supported. We supported them. We'll continue supporting them. I'm not gonna go fight for a refund. I have no issue with that. I'm even tempted to get it on PC just to see if if the fixes have fixed PC version to a certain extent. But I'm not getting rid of my copy. Yeah.
I guess we can move on to the loose topic at this point. And again, obviously, this is the Cyberpunk cast right here because there's so much Cyberpunk talk. Yeah. But we're going to switch it up a little bit here. And this loose topic is going to be kind of an open-ended one, of kind of an interesting talk. So we have the big three right now, which is Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo, obviously, that have kind of dominated the game industry for, almost 20 years now at this point, because Sega was around in the early 2000s, but the last time they really had any traction was late 90s. And so the question is, will the big three ever change? And obviously the answer shorthand is eventually I'm sure they will. But my question to you is, will the big three ever change? If they do, who do you think could possibly stand a chance? What would that look like? Do you think the big three will be added to? Do you think someone will drop out? There's lots of different directions you can kind of tackle this question. Mm-hmm. So what's your immediate thoughts?
So immediate thought, my gut, when I look at this, I'm like, no one will be able to reach the level that Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo are working on. Those are the big three. So I don't think anyone will be able to reach that success, that kind of standard that there is with those three names. It's been, like you said, pretty much the last 20 years, it's been these three. You've had small guys try to come out. Most recently we saw Google Stadia trying to do its thing, and that's nowhere near what these three can do. Xbox within a few months with their xCloud destroyed what Stadia was trying to do for about a year and a half now, 2 years. So if you want proof, there it is. If Google can't break into it, we have Amazon on the horizon attempting something with Luna and things like that. So in my initial gut, I don't think anybody will be able to be close to these three, to at least get on their same level. I if it's someone who's gonna do it, you would have assumed Google would have got close. Again, I don't know how long Google plans to really stick with this streaming platform, especially since it doesn't look like streaming is upgrading to that extent. Like by the time that we can just stream games instantly, it won't work. Will they still be around by the time everyone can have that technology? And that's one thing that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo have done is adapt. And that's one thing we saw really with Nintendo, because a few years ago, prior to the launch of Switch, it looked like Nintendo was on its way out. We all remember the Wii U. We know the joke that is the Wii U, and sadly, unfortunately, but at that time when I saw the Wii U, and I got one past launch because I never even knew it launched. It just kind of came out. But I remember being like, these games are fine, but this control is terrible. The UI is terrible. It's so clunky. The tablet is, oh god, that tablet was just, I don't know who designed that Toys R Us toy. It looked like that they were on their way out, and I'm like, man, but they did what they needed to do, and they adapted, and they flipped the script. They knew that handheld was really their strong point, and then they found that nice sweet spot between it with the Switch. Same with Sony. The PS3 was such a weird time for them that they pretty much relaunched in the middle of it to focus on their games and their stuff, and that's when you got the PS3 Slim, and they were able to adapt. The PS4, they were all hands on gaming experience, and that succeeded, and that's the same thing they're doing now for the PlayStation 5. Same with Xbox. They were able to adapt so quickly. They took some years. 360 was such a success, and then Xbox One, we've gone over on what a debacle that was, to then really fixing them themselves now, and that's why they're pretty much still on top with Sony and Nintendo, is their ability to adapt, and that's one thing I don't think any other company can do on the fly to adapt to that extent, because Google would have adapted by now, released probably a crappy console, and maybe it would have worked better. It's all mystery, so it's really hard to see, because in a world when we were growing up, there was Sega, Nintendo, PlayStation, and and Xbox, and it's such weird to even think that, like, you and I have we have decent retro collections, and it's like we see all these systems we have, and I'm like, there were so other many moving parts, and now we really do have these three guys. Sega is pretty much in bed with all three companies. They used to be really close with Nintendo, despite them being the
main competition at one point
for so long.
Yeah.
So I can't see someone else being able to come to that point. I don't see like Capcom releasing a Capcom box at some point, even though they have titles,
Yeah.
But are you really going to release a system that just plays Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, and Dragon's Dogma? You know what I'm saying? So it's
I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't buy that though.
Me, I'm Capcom fanboy. I buy anything that is pretty much Capcom. Don't get me wrong, but it won't happen. It would be. And it's just so weird. Like, the companies you think that could do it, there's no way I just don't think they can adapt. It's like when Apple started doing that weird Apple game box that streams things, and it just doesn't work right. You know what I'm saying? So, Steam couldn't do it with their Steam Link boxes, and because they didn't really make any, they really relied on other people. So it's like these companies that have or had the chance to do it, I think already dropped the ball, honestly. So I just don't see anyone coming to that point to get to the point that, unfortunately, it's going to be the big three, and that's just how it is. I would love to be wrong. It'd be weird to have another competitor. It'd be weird to see people trying to do things so differently than what is the norm, because, the big three on their main systems do now, anyway, the main thing. Sure, it's got some streaming platforms, but they're like, it's all about the games. And I just don't think any other company could do that and get the goodwill and get people to want to jump in at the start.
Well, the kind of interesting thing is, and I have similar thoughts to you, but actually I kind of take it from a different direction, which is, will the big three ever change as the game industry exists right now? No, it's very hard to break in with these traditional consoles. As it will exist in the future, I think there is a high chance, especially once streaming technology really catches up, there's going to be a power vacuum, and I think Microsoft is built to be in that, and almost no one else is. And I personally think that in the future, not like within the next 5-10 years, but and we're talking 2025, I think the whole service based in conjunction with something that attaches to your TV, a little drive you plug in, something like that, like what Stadia is doing, but definitely what Xbox is moving towards, is going to be a lot more commonplace than having that traditional box. I know people are going to have their traditional PCs and boxes and stuff like that, but I think that is going to become a bigger and bigger part of gaming, because when digital gaming first popped up, people were like, well, I mean, some people are going to do that, but not everybody can do that because not everybody can support those downloads, so people are going to need discs. And fast forward now, it's officially past the 50% mark. It's not that people are not playing on disc, it's that people go towards what's convenient, and what's convenient to you as an established gamer isn't always going to sync up with what the next generation is into. And when you have a brand new generation of gamers that streaming is a very common thing, will they gravitate towards traditional boxes in the same way we have? It's probably unlikely, to be honest. So I think in a kind of streaming dominated type world, I think it's going to be one of three people that could possibly be added to the big three. Nintendo's going to exist as Nintendo does. PlayStation, they've been established long enough for me to feel that they're going to dominate in future generations as well. So I don't think any of these big three go away, but I wouldn't be surprised. It has to be one of three. So obviously Google, if they stick to it and figure it out, maybe. They got the money to play around with it. Amazon, maybe. Again, massive corporation. Luna could be something. And then Apple. With their Apple Arcade, if we're talking about service versus service, if they're able to get the exclusive game up in there, they already understand the tech good enough, they could compete with Xbox in the streaming field as well. Again, it all depends on their abilities to stick by this, do the right moves, and wait for that power vacuum, wait for the tech to change, and wait for an opening, because that's what the industry needs. Openings, and vulnerabilities have always opened the door for new people to jump in. So, for example, it took for Atari to stumble and the game industry to crash for Nintendo to get their in. It took for Sega to kind of take a step back and Nintendo to burn PlayStation for them to get their in. It took for Microsoft to jump in on the early 2000s in Sega's absence in many ways to kind of take that kind of super tech-dominated, we have the strongest console road. So vulnerabilities in the game industries and people kind of slipping in their second, Nintendo coming off the N64 and cartridge-based systems, and then their relationships coming kind of weird. It opens up places in the industry for new people to jump in. And so I think when the massive digital jump goes where people are moving towards, like, I just want something to plug into my TV and be able to play really quick. And again, that's not something that's going to resonate with us. But for a younger generation who are not used to vinyls and CDs and physical games and DVDs and everything's digital, I don't think they want their gaming to differ that much from that. So if they are used to pushing a show whenever they want, and they're not a hardcore gamer that cares too much about latency, and they have good enough internet because internet's going to get better with time, it wouldn't be surprised if they're like, wait, you want to sit there and put in a disc and wait for it to load for me to play? No, they're not going to do all that. They're going to be like, I want to click it and I want to be in the game within 10 seconds, period. And so I wouldn't be surprised that if things move to that streaming only, that somebody can use that vulnerability to jump in a real way. And again, my guess is one of those three guys. And at that point, it could be a big four, or it could be a big two, which would be like maybe Xbox and let's say Amazon Luna, while PlayStation and Nintendo occupy the other side of it with the more traditional, almost console-based hardware. So there's lots of different paths I see things going down. So yeah, if we're just talking raw consoles, there's not a chance in hell anybody breaks in now. Yeah. But I don't doubt that in the future, just service versus service, with things popping up like HBO Max, who would have thought that they would have became? But like, things are weird in the streaming world, where it's all about the relationships you're able to foster. And if theoretically Capcom and Square Enix approach Stadia and like, hey, you got your tech together, you want a couple exclusives, that maybe changes the conversation going forward. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm open to weird things happening, but it's entirely for me dependent on the tech, where the tech goes, where those relationships go. Obviously, Xbox has EA. I think Ubisoft just went to Stadia. So we're going to start seeing these relationships pass, kind of go around and form. And we're going to start seeing some weird things happening. And that's going to make or break things. Is if these relationships amount to something, that's going to put you in a position much more better to compete. So if you're like, hey, if that Ubisoft relationship comes and it's like, hey, if you want to play the new, the new Far Cry or whatever, come to here, that's going to draw some people. And that might be enough to make you compete. So it's going to be really, really interesting. But I think for now, the base three are more than safe. And there's no real existential threats. Except for probably one, which is, the Atari VCS. But beyond that.
Yeah, of course. No, that's interesting. I didn't think of it in that way. And you really kind of got me thinking now. I'm like, well, maybe the big three just gets redefined as what it is. Well,
exactly.
We're so stuck with what it's been. It's always just been this way. To really redefining, remember, Phil Spencer always, Xbox could be an app on your TV soon in a year or two. And so it is interesting to be thinking, well, they could just redefine what the big three is, So that's an interesting way to look at it.
Well, yeah, because Phil Spencer multiple times has communicated the idea that he sees his competition as a competition for time. Not for exclusives, not for the best tech or anything like that, but just time. So he's competing against streaming companies. That's what his concern is who is able to release the gaming service with the most bang for your buck and the most offerings. And in that lane, that switches things up because time has shown that companies have a lot of trouble jumping into the console space, making consoles, because consoles are very difficult to make. Apple's tried it before with the Pippin in the early 90s, I believe. So these companies have tried it, and it's just a very, very difficult thing to do. But if you take away that kind of tech barrier, and all you need is kind of Steam Link or like a little Chromecast type situation, like if all you need is that kind of tech, I feel like it makes it a lot easier for these companies to jump in because they can do services. Apple can do services. Google can do services. It's the consoles that are the barrier. And if consoles reduce in relevance, that completely changes the entire field and makes a lot of competition. I think you're going to have a great expansion and a great contraction because naturally that's what all happens. Happened with the music streaming. It happens with the video streaming where you're going to get a million companies all trying to fight for a piece of the pie. It's not going to work. They're going to consolidate into maybe 3 or 4. And those 3 or 4 people can look fundamentally different than the 3 or 4 that dominated the previous generation.
No, yeah, absolutely.
All right, so that was the NeoVintage podcast. Again, it was the Cyberpunk cast. It was dominated by Cyberpunk stories, and I was worried. I was like, hey, if we only have Cyberpunk to talk about, how are we gonna, is this going to be like a 20-minute show? But look, we always prove them wrong. We're able to crank out more than an hour.
It's just big parts, and there's just so many moving parts in Cyberpunk to discuss.
And like we've said with previous stuff and like Fortnite and stuff like this will not be the last time we talk about it, and this is not the end of this story. And
nope.
Oh, we're going to hear more about Cyberpunk, and probably as soon as next week, we're going to have some new stuff to talk about. So stick with us on the ride, and we're going to have more information for you guys. And we'll see you guys next week. So I'm Jabril, and I'm with
Steve. Hope you guys enjoyed.
And this is the NeoVintage podcast. See you guys.